This is Michael Clara. Welcome to another edition of my blog. This is a continuation of the Cannibalization of Public Education series, and this particular chapter or part of it is titled Utah Legislative Education Task Force. And the following week, this is in October, we had, I didn't attend these meetings, but sorry, I should point out here that the topic was professional development for local school board members. So the leadership of the School Board Association, which is composed of elected members of the board, spoke at this particular testified, if you will, at this task force meeting. And then let me go back then. So this is the reaction that we get from Senator Stevenson, who again is one of the conservative members of the legislature. This is what he had to say following the testimony or the presentation that was given by the leadership.
Next is Senator Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for this presentation. I wanted to ask some questions and then make a couple of comments. I'd like to focus on number 2 again, advocacy. The school board should be advocates for public education. I find that a lot of elected school board members feel pressure to advocate for public education as opposed to advocating for their constituents, advocating for the children in their district, advocating for results and for better teachers. And when school board members do advocate for the things I just mentioned, they're often labeled as obstructionists. And I'll use a specific example that's currently before us, Michael Clara. He has been in Salt Lake District now for less than 1 year, and I believe has advocated for the schools in his precinct. He has advocated for the children in his neighborhoods, probably more than any person I've ever met in the time I've been associated with school boards across this state. And yet he is labeled as an obstructionist. When you talk about using data, Michael Clara uses more data than any school board member I've ever met to prove his point. And I would say that while he is labeled as an obstructionist by his superintendent and by others in Salt Lake District and maybe others in the School Boards Association, I would say that we need more Michael Claras, more people who are willing to advocate for his schools. You know, when he points out, well, I won't go into everything he has pointed out, but I think it's refreshing to have that kind of difference of opinion.
After Senator Stevenson spoke, then Christy Sweat, who again is the vice president of the School Board Association, is the president of the school board that I'm on, she responded.
Next would be, would you like to respond to that in any way?
Would I? Can I, please? Thank you, Senator Stevenson. I appreciate your comments. Being from Salt Lake District, the one thing that, there's a couple of things that I would just like to share, and that is that, you know, our board has never labeled Mr. Clara as an obstructionist, and I don't believe I've ever heard our superintendent call him that. He has a difference of opinion, which he's been given ample opportunity to share in our board meetings. It's a public meeting, and all of us try our hardest, you know, to allow each of us, you know, to share our opinions and ask for information. You know, the 11 years that I've sat on that board, I will tell you that, and it saddens me a little bit to hear you say that you've never heard anybody advocate for the children of the Glendale area, because I spend a lot of time doing that. the Glendale area, where Mr. Clara is from, receives more resources from our budget, than most other schools in our district. And so I would invite you. I would love for you to come to our district and come to our schools, and I would love to sit down and talk to you more about it. I think that it's important that this committee know that that's one board member and is not reflective of all the other 6 board members that sits in Salt Lake District. So I appreciate your comments. I think that given the opportunity that you would see that Salt Lake District does pay attention to the community that Mr. Clara is from, and that the conversations that are handled at our board level center around those highly impacted schools, that we have quite a number of, in Salt Lake City School District.
So that's rather interesting. I'm not even going to go into the, she said several things there that are just simply not true. But, one of the things that I'm dealing with in terms of the mentality is that they believe that because Glendale or the schools in my neighborhood have all these resources, then what am I complaining about? What's the problem? And that's what I'm talking about. There's a lot more to it than just resources. And the other interesting thing that she says that what I'm saying is not reflective of the other 6 board members. And that's ridiculous. I'm not trying to be reflective of the other 6 board members. I'm representing my community and bringing the issues of my community to the school board. So that's a source of friction in terms of the mentality that I'm dealing with, that, we got to be in lockstep and all work together and I'm okay with doing that, but I'm not going to do that at the expense of my community. This next part here is Senator Reid, and let's listen into what he had to say.
Okay, Senator Reid.
Thank you, Mr. President. Honestly, I don't really care what you do. I mean, it's your association. You can do whatever you want to do. And we've had Michael Clare has been his name's been brought up, and he was brought before this committee. I don't know who invited him to come, but he spoke, and some of those of us addressed it, and I think his example goes to the core of where I would differ with you, having prefaced my statement by saying I don't really care what you do. You have your association. If you want to train board members and they want to come in for your training, then God bless them. But when we get on this whole discussion about an obstructionist, I don't even know what that means, honestly. And I think it may be someone comes to the board not to promote public ed, and whatever that means. What does it mean to promote public ed? But perhaps they come to the board to reform public ed. That's their whole intent in getting elected, is to change the system. What if it is that they go to the board solely to represent the parents against public ed? Because they think public ed, whatever that is, and it's different in every district, obviously, but it's whatever the majority on the board defines it as, and they decided in running that the majority, present majority or past majorities, got it wrong. And in that process, they've left out parents. I'm just using that as an example. It could be any number of reasons that they get elected. And so your approach is to try to get what it sounds like, to get conformity, right? To get everybody to kind of agree and go along with the process of public ed, whatever that is, or how that's being defined by the school board, the existing school board or the association. And those who may not agree with that process, that approach, appear to be ostracized. Which is, again, part of the political process, I guess, as well. If we don't like someone speaking out, we ostracize them. Somehow we identify them different than we are, or out of the mainstream, or whatever the case may be. But I would say if you take the legislature as a body, at different times, individuals in that body, maybe every individual in that body is an obstructionist, right? Because they have the thousands of issues we deal with. There may be an issue that a legislator came to the legislature to champion. Now he or she has to vote on, 1,000 bills, but there's one or two things they really, really want to press. Perhaps because others aren't, or because it's not being pressed in the way that they think is appropriate. And the same thing will happen to them, both in caucus and outside caucus. There's pressure on them to conform, to go along with the herd, right? I don't think that helps anybody, honestly, to try to quiet someone in opposition. It is that noise that causes everybody to look at it in a more holistic way and question whether their approach really is the best approach. I would hate a system where the Speaker and the President gave us a list of the bills and said, this is how you're going to vote. I don't think that would serve the public well. And I'm not sure that as a body that would serve the legislature well. So rather than trying to push for conformity, it seems to me that we should be empowering people to speak up and to represent their individual districts, their individual interests, and to contribute in every way that they can. And if occasion they speak too loud to our liking, well, we just endure it, right? But we don't somehow label them and identify them as an obstructionist. There's nothing beneficial in that, in my view. Let them be who they are, and if the people who they're representing, they don't like it, they'll run them out of office. They'll vote them out of office. But I'm not sure it's anybody's role to try to establish conformity. And as to the relationship of the superintendent and the board, from my perspective, the primary function in our form of government is for the board to provide oversight, or the legislature, in the case of the relationship between the governor and the legislature, is to provide oversight of the administration, first and foremost, above all other considerations. Because the administration it executes policies, procedures, administrations that may or may not be fair to all those who are the recipients of that execution. And somebody has to represent in the system those who may be harmed by that execution, and have to remind administration, and sometimes in no uncertain terms, that this is not right, it's not fair, and people are being harmed. So again, you do what you think you ought to do. It's your association, and in that sense it's private, and people can join it, participate in it or not. But I would just caution you to not establish a culture where the person who does speak out, who does disagree, who wants to fight for people he or she thinks are underrepresented within the system, that somehow they're ostracized or belittled because they're doing what they feel is very important. And sometimes they think they have to speak louder because they're not being heard. Now I'll just end with this. I was a city council member on the west side, represented the Rose Park area. And I can tell you, and this is why I encourage Michael to speak up, and I'll do it again. I can tell you during my time of service, and up until my time of service, the West Side did not receive all the advantages of the rest of the city. And I spoke loudly about that. and things began to change.
So I'm going to have to stop, in the interest of time, stop him there. But, I appreciate his counsel and what he had to say. In closing this segment here, he talks about conformity. He talks about elections, and I really appreciate that, because I've said that to the superintendent and the board president. Stop evaluating my performance and what you think I should be asking and not asking, because guess what? In 4 years, my neighbors will sort that out with me. If I'm doing and asking questions, I feel that I'm protecting my neighbors' children and their tax dollars, and being a good steward of that, and asking for answers and requiring change in behavior. If they feel that that's too much, guess what? They're not going to reelect me. But that's for them to decide what, that, not the superintendent. And so I appreciate, Senator Stewart pointing that out. And, at the very end there, he points out what the balance of power is about. This role reversal that we're doing right now, where the superintendent acts like I work for him, is just ridiculous, which speaks then, to the whole title of this, this segment that we have here, the cannibalization of public education. In closing, this was a letter. These, what you just heard happen in, towards the end of last year. And now this was, last year in 2013 of December, which was a year ago today. This letter is dated wrong, but it happened in 2013. But this is where, the board president, superintendent, and business administrator wrote a letter to the Speaker of the House saying that, that they're willing to and able to engage in conversation, constructive deliberations with Mr. Clara. By implication, I'm not constructive. And then we believe that his perspective, if it can be conveyed through civil discourse, can make a valuable contribution to our board decisions. And then, she says here at the end, if you have further correspondence with him, please encourage him to bring his energy he currently devotes to letter writing and filing complaints to discussions of our board table. That's just schizophrenic. There's no other word for it, because I can't bring things to the board, quote unquote, board table, because they'll cut me off. They demonstrated that whole first year that I was on the board. They did the same thing the second year, the 2014, that I was on the board. But so it's just a skillful shell game that it doesn't matter what I do. If they're going to cut me off at the board meeting, they're going to, counter me at task force meetings with the legislature. They're going to write letters about me. And no, I'm not an obstructionist, but I am uncivil. And I'm not constructive, by implication in this letter. So that's the battle that we have going on here. But it's a public education that's just absolutely just going to implode on itself. And in another segment, I talk about the blueprint that the mastermind segment is talking about, this email here, and a lot of the emails that the public information officer has written out in an effort to block any of the concerns that I bring up. And this is the blueprint on what they're supposed to do, which they have done. The public information officer's boss even monitors my church activities and what my calling is in the LDS church. And as you see here at the bottom, Mikhail responds to an email saying, yeah, it was my understanding that he was on the High Council somewhere. Sounds like we know where now. What concern is it of these men, what I do in church? And this is again, just so ridiculous, and it's embarrassing to be part of an institution that has adults that behave in this manner. What the outcome is, student outcome for students in my community is my priority. And these guys are worried about me and worried about what I do at church, worried about what I say here and there, but in ensuring that I don't say anything at school board meetings. So anyways, that's the ridiculousness of the public education system here in the Salt Lake City School District.